Katie. Welcome to this week's food prep. This week I was lucky enough to get a block of mostly uninterrupted time, so I was able to knock out all of these projects all at once. And so instead of showing you each project sort of individually, I'm going to show you the whole food prep from beginning to end, so you can kind of see how I interlace all of these projects, trying to make the most use of my time. So I'm going to start by making a butternut squash tomato soup, and it calls for chicken stock, which I didn't have on hand, so I'm just going to make a very quick chicken stock. These are frozen skinned chicken legs, and I'm just going to put them in my pressure cooker. They're still frozen, so it's just chicken. I'm going to add a couple quarts of water and I'm going to pressure cook it. So I'm just going to pressure cook it at 18 pounds of pressure for like 15 minutes. Next, I'm going to get my squash ready. For this recipe, if I'm just making one batch, usually I will just skin the squash and dice it up, so just peel it and dice it. I didn't want to peel that much butternut squash, and I also thought that roasting it might give it a nice flavor. So I figured if it was roasted, then I could scoop the flesh out of the skin there, and would be a lot easier than peeling it. So I just cut the squash in half. I'm scooping the seeds out of that cavity, and then I'm going to cut down that sort of long neck, just because they're kind of longer than normal, and I thought it would help it cook a little bit more quickly and more evenly. So once I have my squash cut and prepped, I'm just going to rub the cut surface with a little bit of olive oil. That will just keep it from drying out when it's roasting. I also put a little bit of salt and pepper on the squash as well. Put it in a hot oven. I think it was about 425 degrees, I believe, and just let it roast while I worked on everything else. There's another butternut squash that I'm using for a different recipe that I wanted to go ahead and prep, and this one I am peeling and dicing. So to peel it, you just need a very sharp, very thin bladed knife, and you want to just carefully peel that outer layer off. And I like to cut the neck off of sort of that bulbous end of the squash and sort of attack them separately. I find it a little bit easier that way. So I've peeled the neck part of the squash, and then for the other part I'm going to cut it in half, scoop out the seeds just like I did with the other squash, and then again use my sharp knife and peel that outer rim or rind off of the squash, trying to not waste as much fruit as possible. But just take your time. This is obviously sped up footage. You just want to take your time. It's not worth losing a fingertip over peeling a squash, so just take your time and just relax. Once I have it all peeled up, I'm going to dice it, and I'm just dicing it in sort of large chunks. I'm going to roast this later on in the week, so I'm just going to store it raw. I feel like it lasts a little bit longer if you store it raw, and then once it's roasted, I feel like you kind of need to use it right away. So as long as it's raw in the refrigerator, it will last for several days. So there I am, just dicing up the neck part. I just sliced it and then cut those slices into sixths. Cover it up, put it in the fridge. The seeds I'm going to roast, so I'm just going to remove the seeds from the stringy bits. So I'm just kind of squeezing that pulp, and the seeds kind of squirt out. I'm just collecting them. I don't rinse them with water or anything. I kind of like a little bit of the flavor you get from the stringy bits, and I wasn't able to roast them since I didn't have my I only have one sheet pan, so I will just put the seeds aside. There, my chicken stock is done, so I just took it off the hot burner, pushed it to the side, and let it cool. Next, I'm going to make some mayonnaise. I have a whole video on how to make mayonnaise, including some tricks. So if you've tried making mayonnaise before and it didn't work out for you, check that video out, because I had a lot of trial and error when I first learned how to make mayonnaise, and I kind of figured out a way that I haven't had any problems with it since. So check that video out. But mayonnaise is very simple. It's just egg yolk, some Dijon mustard, oil, and lemon juice, and salt and pepper. So here I'm making mayonnaise, and I'm going to use this mayonnaise to make some chicken salad. Originally I was going to make egg salad, but since I was cooking those chicken legs for the chicken stock anyway, I figured I would use the meat from that chicken and make chicken salad. So I'm just going to make the mayonnaise, and I'll use most of this for the chicken salad, and then we're also going to have a soup and sandwich meal later on in the week, and my husband likes mayonnaise on his sandwiches, so I'm just saving part of the mayonnaise for later on in the week, and I'm going to put that in the fridge. And then that bowl of mayonnaise, I'm just going to put that whole thing in the fridge as well. Checking on my squash, it's getting tender, but I wanted to get a little bit browned. I thought maybe that would add a little bit of extra flavor, so I'm going to let it roast a little bit more and focus on my chicken stock again. So I'm going to open up my pressure cooker, and inside is my chicken and my chicken stock. So I'm going to remove the chicken to a separate bowl and just let that cool. So I'll just set it aside. I'm not going to put this in my refrigerator. I don't like to put very hot foods in my refrigerator because it can raise the temperature of other foods in your refrigerator. And so I'm just putting it on the counter. And then I'm going to strain the chicken stock. These were whole pieces of chicken, so there's not going to be a lot of little bits. If you were making chicken stock from a carcass, I really like to strain it because you'll get every little fragment of bone and stuff. So there you can see my chicken stock. It's not super rich looking, but it's definitely better than water for my soup. So I'll also set that aside just to let it cool down until I'm ready to use it. Next, I'm going to make some banana bread to use up some overripe bananas. And I'm going to make muffins, but you can use the same recipe to make regular loaves of banana bread. This recipe that I like to use is from All Recipes, and I'll link it down below. It's a really good banana bread recipe. I really like it because it uses whole wheat flour. I always try to incorporate whole wheat flour whenever possible. So I have my dry ingredients, which is just whole wheat flour and baking powder, and then my wet ingredients, which is egg and oil and sugar and the bananas and some vanilla. And then I just mix the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients and stir to just combine. You don't want to overmix. And then once it's stirred together, I'm going to go ahead and add chocolate chips. It's also good to add walnuts too. I just didn't think of it. So in go the chocolate chips. I'm going to stir those in till they're thoroughly incorporated. And then I'm going to put my paper liners into my muffin tray there and fill each cavity with some of that batter. And if the chocolate chips weren't enough, I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some chocolate jimmies on top. So my squash is finished. I'm going to pull it out. So now my oven is free. I'm going to put my muffins in, but I need to let the oven cool a little bit since I was roasting the squash at a much higher temperature than I would bake the muffins at. So once my oven came down in temperature to 350, I'm going to go ahead and put my banana muffins in and let them bake for 20 minutes. So the squash I'm going to remove onto a plate and just set that aside to cool. And I'm going to wash my sheet pan. Now, since I opened this big old bag of chocolate chips, I'm going to portion it up and vacuum seal it. I have this really cool attachment for my vacuum saver or for my food saver, and it vacuum seals in regular mason jars with regular mason jar lids. So you just put that contraption on top of your mason jar, hit the canister button on the food saver, and it vacuum seals. Then once you're done, you just pull the cord out, pop that thing off of your jar, and your button is down, so it's vacuum sealed. The lid is secure, and it will keep your chocolate chips fresh, and it will also keep my little fingers from snacking on my chocolate chips so that they're available when I want to do some baking. So by the time I was done with that, my muffins were done, so I pulled them out and just set them aside to cool. Next, I'm going to finish up my chicken salad. So I have my cooled chicken. I pulled my mayonnaise back out from the refrigerator, and I was going to just make this in that bowl, but I had a little bit more chicken than I anticipated, so I needed a slightly larger bowl. And I'm just going to mix the chicken and the mayonnaise together. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough mayonnaise, but I do have some extra mayonnaise in the fridge if I needed to add it, but I found that it was just right amount. And I do chicken salad a little bit different every time, but I thought because this was made with all dark meat that it might have sort of a heavy or greasy feel, that I would do sort of light, bright flavors to add to this. So I diced up an apple and I soaked it in some lemon juice. Scooped the apples out of the lemon juice and added that. I also added some diced up celery. So I'm just going to dice that right into the chicken salad as well. And then I also added some dried cranberries. So pretty simple chicken salad. So once it was all mixed up, I added some salt and pepper. I did add a little bit more of that lemon juice and a drizzle of honey, and that's all I did for that chicken salad. So once I had it all mixed up, I just went ahead and portioned it out into some plastic containers. I had one stalk of celery that was a little bit too much to add to the chicken salad, so I just added that so my husband can take that for lunch and have a little extra celery on the side. So put some lids on those containers and put those in the refrigerator. They're ready to go for lunch. So my squash has had a chance to cool slightly, and just using a large spoon, I'm just scooping the roasted flesh out of the skin. It worked out pretty well. I think it's was a little bit of more work than I thought it would be, but it's definitely easier than peeling a raw butternut squash. So just go ahead and scoop all of that roasted flesh and put it in my pot. I'm also going to add a lot of tomatoes, so I have these big number 10 cans I get from Costco. I'm going to use 1.5 of those big cans. So the other half of the second container I'm just putting in those freezer containers, and I'll just have those in the freezer for later on when I need them. So I have the butternut squash in that pan, the tomatoes, and the chicken stock. I'm also going to put some sage. I figured I might as well put in a stalk of rosemary as well. And then I'm going to stir everything together, and you want to make sure you're stirring that thicker butternut squash away from the bottom so that when you're simmering it, it doesn't scorch. So just give it a good stir, and we were eating dinner. I'm just let this simmer while we were eating dinner. I brought it to a boil, simmered it for like 15 minutes, and then I turned it off and let it cool while I washed dishes and got the little one ready for bed. And then the next thing I did is I went ahead and roasted my seeds. So this is a little bit later in the evening. I just put some olive oil and salt and pepper, spread the seeds out in a single layer, and I put those in a hot oven, a 400-degree oven or so, and let them roast for about 10 minutes. They're small seeds, so they don't take that long. So my soup has cooled for quite a while, but it's still pretty hot. So just be careful if you're blending hot soup. I could have blended all of this and then simmered it, or I mean everything is cooked. I could have just blended it and stored it straight away. But I did want it to cook together a little bit, and also in order to season it, I wanted to bring it up to the proper temperature. So either way, I think it would work. And I think you can even cook soup in your Vitamix with the friction of the spinning blades will cook it, but I've never tried that. So I just blended it all up. I got a bunch of soup, and I'm just going to divide it up into these freezer containers. And this is really great soup for grilled cheese sandwiches or any kind of sandwiches. It's a nice veggie side dish too if you don't have a vegetable. So my seeds, which I stirred halfway through, are ready. They're cooled off, and I'm just going to store them in a plastic container. And my muffins are cooled, so I'm just going to pack those up in a plastic container. These are pretty moist muffins, so I did end up putting them in the refrigerator just so they would be okay. And then when I was packing stuff in the refrigerator, I realized that I had this, I bought all of this ground pork on a good deal, and so I just packaged it up into these kind of freezer containers. I've showed this before. You just pack it down into these pint-sized freezer containers. They hold exactly 1 pound of ground meat. Works out really easily, and they're reusable, so you don't have to throw away a bunch of plastic bags. So I got a bunch of 1 pound portions, and then I made 1 2-pound portion, which I will use next time I make a big batch of meatballs, which hopefully will happen next week. So I'll show you that as well. That's everything I have this week for food prep. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would, just give that video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.